Oh yeah. You're a hexastylus, which is like related to the wild ginger, but this is like the evergreen kind, and it smells more like sassafras. So we need to just look at this. This is really a special thing here. Everybody grab a leaf and crush the leaf and smell it. Because you see the plant's not very distinctive looking. The leaf's kind of a sort of a typical oval shape with a point on it, sort of typical leaf shape. But if you smell it, all of a sudden you realize it's a whole lot different than anything else. Crush it a little bit and smell it. You get that strong smell. Remember somebody saying, "What's that lemon pledge plant?" It has kind of a lemony kind of a fragrance to it. You see these little berries that are starting to form? This is called the spice bush. Spice bush in the books, Lindera benzoin. Some people, the mountain people, usually call it spice wood. I can remember years ago, my old buddy Lee called me up, and every now and then I get a call from Lee, and I could always recognize his voice on the phone because it was real high pitched. He'd go, "Doug, I got a possum over here. You want this possum?" And well, I always feel honor bound to attend if someone calls me about a possum, you know. So I showed up, and a lot of times he'd have a possum, he caught it in a live trap. They'd get in his chickens, you know. And I said, "Oh, thanks, Lee, I'll eat that possum." We'd stuff it in the sack, you know, and I'd take it down the road, let the poor thing go, you know. And then, but now and then he'd, you know, his dogs would tree one, and they'd shoot it out of the tree, and it'd be a big dead possum. I remember one time he had this big one. He says, "Look at this one, Doug. It's a fat one, buddy. Look at the hams on this thing, you know." Now you want to cook him right. He says, "What you do is you get him all skinned and cleaned. And then you just take some spicewood twigs, and you fill him up with those little twigs till he looks like a little porcupine. Then you parboil him, and then you put him in the oven, put some sweet taters around him, buddy, and bake him, and you have the finest eating, and that spicewood will take away all the gamey flavor." Well, I did that, and boy, it's really made a good flavor to the meat. And nowadays, when I cook wild meat, it almost always has some spicewood in it. So next time you cook a possum, you'll know what to do, right? Right? Now, you want to follow Appalachian tradition. And you see these berries, they're just forming. I don't see any of them that turned red yet. But when they turn red, then you can gather them, and they're American allspice. And you can use them as a spice, like particularly for apples. Sometimes we put them in curries. We just gather a handful, lasts you all winter, and you let them dry, and then you just crush them up. We have a little mortar and pestle, a little suribachi, and we just crush them up. And you can taste one of these berries as you go by. They're you kind of bite into them, and they're pretty pungent. Just a small amount, just sprinkle on top of applesauce, or just cook them with it, 1 or 2 in a quart. Well, they're not quite as strong, but they got some flavor to them. They're bright red, and often they need to be in the sunlight a little bit before you really can see them.
Yeah, this is another one of the coral mushrooms.
Yeah.
This one's called white worm coral, and it's one of the Clavulinopsis species. And this one is a tooth fungus. So if people want to pass it around and look at the underside, so the important thing about mushrooms is how they produce their spores. That's the first thing you want to look at. And so usually it's a matter of turning it upside down and seeing. And sometimes they have gills, like in this case. Sometimes they have pores, like with some of the boletes. And then this is a whole different group, and they have like teeth, and it feels like bristles on a brush, really soft bristles. So pass that around, and everybody can feel that and look at it, and you can kind of get an idea of what that's about. And later we'll talk about some of the ones from that group that are good to eat.
I found that one growing out of a little log.
Huh? Yeah. Great example of a bolete. So another one that you turn it upside down and you see the pores. So this is how it produces its spores. It has these little pores. And then, like if you pinch a little piece of it off, you can see the pores there. But any place that you touch it or injure it, see it turns blue. And sometimes, you know, the bluing will be immediate. Sometimes it'll take a few seconds. But it's one of the key identification characteristics, not only blue, but also all kinds of different colors that mushrooms will bruise. You know, they'll bruise brown or black or red in a lot of cases. But In the case of the boletes, the blue bruising of the pores is a fairly common thing. So this one's called the cracked cap bolete, and if you look at the cap, if it's dry especially, the top of the cap surface will develop these little fissures in it so that it looks like it's cracked. And so it's Boletus crescenteron, the cracked cap bolete. No, it actually gives an olive colored spore print. The question was, would this give a blue spore print? No, it would give an olive colored spore print for this particular species. The bruising isn't necessarily reflected in the spore color. It can vary quite a bit, actually. A white spored mushroom can bruise blue as well. So,
is that edible, that one?
This one is edible. It's a little tricky with the boletes that bruise blue, and we have a couple of others that we'll look at a little bit later, and we can talk about how you separate those out. But this one is fairly common. It's you find it in lawns a lot of the times, in places where it's under pines and you have more moss than you do grass. Oh, sorry. Another bolete you can see. So the term bolete is a common term for all the mushrooms, the soft fleshy mushrooms that have these pores like that. They're all called boletes. Many different kinds of them. There's several different genera. One of them is Boletus, and it just happens that both of these are in that genus. This was Boletus castanea, which means chestnut bolete. And you can see why it's called that. The color of the top of the cap and the stem is that chestnut color. Another fairly small but common, pretty decent edible bolete, easy to identify. And this small one, we have some larger ones back in the refrigerator that are going to be in our dinner tonight, but this is a very young specimen of Pleurotus austriatus, the tree oyster mushroom. And so one of the really good edibles. It's also being cultivated now, so you can buy it in a lot of the markets, and a lot of local people are cultivating them both outdoors and indoors. But they're a very important wood rotting mushroom. Typically find them here growing on tulip poplar. Okay, so we'll just continue along like this and just stop periodically. And so when people have found something, just bring it up, and then we'll talk about them individually.
It's like a morning glory,
This is one of those LBMs that's really hard to identify. Little bitty mushroom, little brown mushroom. But we're going to take it, and when we get back, we'll cut it open and see if we can tell anything about it. Another wood rotter, typical sort of funnel shape. Often you'll see a well-rotted log that'll have a whole row of these, maybe 20 or 30 in one place. And it's called the funnel colibia. And it is an edible. It's not in the choice category necessarily, but it is a safe edible mushroom. So, so this is a really nice find. These are a mushroom that is very infrequent around here. This year I've seen more of these than ever before in 30 years of collecting, and it's called the gypsy mushroom, Rosites caperata. And the gypsy mushroom is one of the few brown spored mushrooms in the Cortinarius family that is edible. And it's actually a very good edible. I brought a few that we'll be able to sample this weekend. So, and we'll add these to the mix, if that's okay. Okay. So the gypsy mushroom, it has these sort of brownish gills early on, and then they turn a little bit darker. And you'll hear me a lot refer to spore color, because spore color is the most important feature that we can see just with our naked eyes. That helps us to identify the mushrooms, or at least place them in a genus. And so the spore color for this one is going to be brown. So it's the Cortinarius family. Most of the Cortinarius are either inedible, and a few are toxic. And so it's not usually brown spored mushrooms you steer clear of, but this is one of the few exceptions. But it has other characteristics that are distinct enough that it's pretty easy to separate. And so we'll do a spore print. I can show you that. And then, of course, the other, just the morphological features, if you look at the top of it, it looks like it's had flowers sprinkled on it. And then it has the really white stem that looks like it's got little scales on it. And then something that's kind of missing that probably fell off after it was picked, but there's usually like a ring right around the stem there, a very distinctive ring, and that's where it's the species name caperata comes from. It's like a cape. And so that's a distinctive thing. Most of the Cortinarius family, rather than having a ring on the stem, they have this sort of spider webby material called cortina, which we'll get a chance to see also, I'm sure.
But look at this. This is wild lettuce, and you can tell it's like tiny little dandelion-like flowers. And when you break it, can you see what happens to the leaf when you break it? It has milk in it. So we've had a lactarius mushroom over there that gives milk. We have a lactuca, it's the scientific name of lettuce. And you know, even your garden lettuce, when it gets too old, you know, when you break it off, it bleeds, it gets milky, and gets bitter. So this is a little bit bitter, but it is edible.
So they're good before it sets flowers?
It'd be better, you know, better that way. I mean, I'm tasting this right now, and it's not that bitter. You could taste some.